everyone, and welcome back to Brown Coat Reviews. I'm your host, Laura. Now, we're in the middle of our 30-day challenge, which is 30 videos in 30 days. So please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos because we have some amazing content coming that you are not going to want to miss. Now, I was challenged by one of our viewers, Dave, to talk about the best and the worst women written by a man versus the best and worst woman written by a woman. That is a tall order, but it also breaks into my very opinionated territory. Now, I have been very good so far. I promise. I've been good. I try not to give you all my rant and raves. For instance, my poor husband has not been silly enough to on camera ask or say that the prequel Star Wars trilogy isn't that bad. Because he knows exactly what happens the second he utters those words. I go into about a 10-minute rant about why the prequel trilogy does not meet the acting, writing, or expectation of the original trilogy and why it needs to go very, very, very far away. So likewise, I get very passionate about other stories. Don't even get me started about sparkly vampires, people. Just saying. Ugh. With comic books, sadly, I am the same. And there is one comic book that definitely got the same emotional response. So as soon as Dave asked this question, I immediately thought about this one. Now, I've talked to you about Zenescope. I've talked to you about how the earlier writing was very good. And yes, they do always lean on an original source material, such as an original story that we're familiar with, to then give it their own twist. But they always kind of had that overall good writing in the original stories. In the recent stuff, they decided that they were going to create more self-contained stories. And sadly, this is one of those that didn't just miss the mark, it blew way past it. And that is Peekaboo. Peekaboo, here I'll zoom in on it, it's got a really cool cover. So Victoria Rau, I am very sorry, but your tale of Peekaboo didn't make the cut. Now, I have about 20 ways that she can fix this story, and it can be better, but sadly, no one at Zenescope consulted me before writing this story, so therefore, the story is what it is. So, let's delve in. It is a self-contained graphic novel, except I think part of the problem is they had a Lost conundrum, and then I think they were preparing this to be a sequel. So, let's jump into the story. Okay, so Peekaboo is definitely very beautifully drawn. And one of the things that I actually appreciated is at the very beginning, they give you sort of this cast map of the different families that are involved in the story. And then as cast members pass away, you start seeing the red X's. And yes, I am going to give spoilers on this story because it's not that good, so I expect anyone who's watching this video to not really want to read it. And if you want to read it, you can buy my copy. I will give it to you at a great discount. The original concept of this story, yes, it's dark and twisty. I mean, this should be right up my alley. The original thought was, okay, you're going on a camping trip, except it is a gathering of different families. They're all going to go out into the wilderness. Some of them have more hiking skills. Some of them are definitely your typical Hollywood fluffy characters who have never picked up a pickaxe, let alone, worn a hiking backpack. Okay, fine. What we find out is that typically people who go on this particular hiking trip tend to disappear. There are accidents that occur. And then we start to figure out what kind of accidents are happening. People start dying. Oh yay. Everything is being attacked. And we have these creatures. These almost Tales from the Crypt Keeper-esque creatures that keep attacking throughout the storyline. Now, let's talk about a couple main, very particular issues I had with the story. So, the middle daughter always has a braid, and she's very easy to identify. However, let me go back to that original casting picture. Pam is the mom, Debbie is the daughter. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So if you notice, Pam and Debbie both have the same hair color, the same hairstyle, and unless Debbie says mom somewhere in the sentence, it's really hard to tell one character from the other because they are written in the exact same voice. Technically, so is Maggie, so you can't actually tell these three women apart, which to me is really annoying. There are a couple key things about Maggie eventually within this story that you're like, oh, okay, I can tell Maggie from the others, but she's the one with the braid. She's not the one I needed to distinguish from Debbie and Pam. Again, a little annoying. The other issue that I had, so this is another example. So both women are drawn in the same panel. Again, thankfully, Debbie says mom, and I can tell it's the daughter. But a lot of times you'll see in these action sequences, all you can see is brown hair and she's calling out for help. And I can't tell, well, is the daughter in danger or is the mom in danger? And this happens a lot. Sometimes, the hair will be a little bit darker because they're in the middle of an action sequence. And so then I can't tell, okay, well, is this the other woman in this story? Because again, it's the same hairstyle. Or is it the daughter or mother? In this particular instance, like I said, I can kind of tell by the purple shirt, but you get the idea of the diversion of the artwork. It did get a little annoying to try and differentiate the women, and I really did not like that they all had the exact same voice. So, one of the key problems that I had with this story are these Tales from the Crypt-esque creatures. At the beginning of the story, we notice that the creatures kill the men every time, but if a woman is attacked by these creatures, she is taken hostage, tortured, and then killed. But they never ever explain why there is a difference, why the creatures treated the women differently, or why the creatures prolonged the torture for these women. Never explained. That's a problem for me. Second issue I had was we never understood, one, where the creatures came from, and two, there appeared to be some sort of, that's why I say there's a lost example here, where they get to the final issue and they're like, oh my gosh, we now need to explain who these creatures are, how they got there, and what's this, what's the story with this hike? Why do we need the hike? What's the purpose of these disappearing people in hiking accidents? You do get the sense that there's some sort of conspiracy, whether it's the park rangers, whether it's the government, the forestry services. Someone is involved and knows about these creatures, and these creatures are cannibals. So, and they've also been around for a very long time. So that level of conspiracy is very interesting to me, but they never actually explain what it is. And in the very last panel of this issue, you have our park rangers, and there's enough of an allude to, well, did they know? Have they known all along? And it was leaving an opening for a sequel. The problem was I was looking at these creatures in this issue. I didn't care about them. I didn't understand why they were there, how on earth they had been there for that long and been protected. How had they been fed for that long and no one noticed? And again, why the women? Why are they trying to capture the women? It had nothing to do with reproduction. Trust me, I went through that theory too. There was no explanation because, again, all they did was they captured the women, tortured them, and then killed them. Like, so why not just kill the women too? Why make that distinction? And then you get into the main characters. So I've talked about the artwork. We have the Coulter family. Now, we learn that the father has military training. And technically the mother is not officially military, but she was trained by her husband how to shoot. And it sounds like she then taught her children. The oldest daughter became, or basically followed her father's footsteps and went into the military as well. So you have a lot of really just badass characters that kick butt, take names, and know how to handle some weapons. So when all hell breaks loose, and suddenly we're now under attack and we've lost our guide and we're in the middle of nowhere, it's this family that sort of suits up and kind of pulls a Sarah Connor and is like, well, we've got this. The problem was, that idea is really cool. I liked it. I liked the fact that it was not a lot of running around trying to figure out how to survive and just getting slaughtered, which we've seen in a lot of other stories. I liked the element that they knew how to protect themselves, and I liked that the women also knew how to protect themselves and how to carry a weapon, which was great. The problem that I had was there was very little explanation. There are some flashbacks of the father teaching the daughter how to, handle weapons and sort of her inspiration to go into the military. But there was something lacking. There was something lacking in the entire family that I couldn't understand. It felt more like we're going to put them in the middle of nowhere, and instead of being helpless women, we are going to give them guns and they're going to know how to use it. And they're going to take on these creatures. Like, okay, great idea. Give me more. It sounds like a really B-rated, crappy movie pitch that is meant to be all action and no plot line. And if that's the case, this achieved it. Some of you are going to disagree with me, and that's the difference between me being vastly opinionated and being a little bit more politically correct. There are some instances where, gosh, like I said, oh my gosh, just put me in the writer's room. I can come up with about 7 ways that you can save this series. Focus in on that conspiracy. And give me a reason why the women are being tortured. Give me the storyline. There is one point where you see almost like a shaman. He appears to be one of the leaders of these creatures. But again, the shaman doesn't seem to really lead them. He doesn't seem to act any differently from the rest of the creatures. Doesn't seem to show that he is maybe more intelligent than the other creatures, and maybe he is the one that's been communicating with all these government agencies. Nothing. So I'm like, all right, you have just creatures. They eat humans, they kill them, they capture women. That is literally all that they do. And they live in caves. So, yeah. From a story standpoint, when I do recommend Zenescope titles, I'm a little worried about people who just sort of pick up a random title because you'll find this one on sale. I picked it up because it was on sale. I was like, oh, well, let's give it a shot. No problem. Grabbed it. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. So please avoid it. Don't read it. I do hope that Victoria Rau had a better opportunity to write and give character depth, and maybe this was her first attempt. So maybe I am being very, very harsh, but this was just one example where it just went wrong on so many different levels because I feel like they were trying to create something more complicated than was ever there in the first place. Like I said, it's lost. Where you're so busy trying to keep people distracted by all the different layers and oh my gosh, it's all these things. And then eventually we've got to end the story. And then they all wake up, or are they already dead? Who cares? By that point, you're like, really? I'm that let down by the ending? That was this story. Avoid it. There are far better dark and twisty stories. There are far better Zenescope dark and twisty stories. The Piper. Read The Piper. Don't read this. This is not worth it. There are a couple other series done by Zenescope where in some ways they messed it up the first time and then they got it right the second time. Maybe they're going to do a better go of this the second round. But this is definitely my one example. I will continue answering, and I will come up with other examples of women who have done an amazing job writing women, and some examples of when men have done a great and a horrible job of writing women. So just stay tuned in because, yes, I am going to stay vastly opinionated, but I want to know down in the comments, was there a storyline that you read that you sat there and said, oh, well, it's a great idea, but really? That's your ending? Tell me, which storyline gets you so frustrated because you're like, on every single level, it does not work? Because I would like a list for my own reference of stories that you recommend that I avoid. I appreciate it. And this is Laura from Brown Coat Reviews, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon.